Welcome to 4 Quarter Lives, a podcast exploring the profound impact of longer, healthier, and more engaged lives, not only for ourselves and our couples, but also for companies and countries. I'm Avivah Wittenberg-Cox, and on this week's 4 Quarter Lives, I talk with Céline Abecassis-Moedas about the Longevity Leadership Program, a 1-week course that Céline and I created, designed, and run together in Lisbon, coming up this June. The program was born from a shared vision to help leaders and organizations navigate the profound demographic shifts reshaping our world. In this conversation, we'll share why we created the program, how it bridges macro-level insights on aging populations with actionable strategies for careers, companies, and cities, and what participants have said about their transformative experience in the first edition of the program. Céline, who was the former Dean of Executive Education and now Provost at Catolica Lisbon School of Business and Economics, brings her unique perspective on lifelong learning, while I draw on my work with leaders across industries to shape an interdisciplinary and impactful program. If you're curious about how longevity impacts our lives, work, and societies, or how you can lead and thrive in this age of change and longevity, this episode will give you a taster of our answer. We're going to dive into the story, structure, and success of the Lisbon Longevity Leadership Program. So welcome, Céline Abecassis-Moedas, to 4 Quarter Lives. Delighted to have you.
Great to be here.
We are old friends and now colleagues, and we're going to be talking today about the Longevity Leadership Program that we dreamt up together and hosted in your university. So give me a little bit your version of our shared story. What inspired the creation of this Longevity Leadership Program, and how did you get interested in this whole topic?
So let me start by how I got interested. So something happened to me, which happens to a lot of people. I turned 50. And I turned 50 in the middle of COVID. As you probably remember, I was freaking out at the time. I say you remember because this is when we met. You had an online course for women turning 50, midlife rethink. And I started realizing on my own case that there was a whole new era or a new part of life that was coming ahead of me that I had not thought about. So that was the first thing that happened. And then I started thinking that I was actually in a very unique position because I'm an academic, I'm a professor, and I was at the time Dean for Executive Education, which is the part in a business school and in a university where we think the most about what we call lifelong learning. And I started realizing that we're thinking and we're doing a lot of lifelong learning, but very little is customized for people above, let's say, 55. And I felt almost like a mission to change that. And this is when you and I started discussing. The funny part is, as you remember, we launched the program in June 2024. And at the end of that week, I went back to our notes and I realized we started discussing it literally exactly a year before. So our first discussion, we brought you to discuss longevity with the Advanced Management Program, which is one of the senior programs. And then in June 2023, we started discussing the idea from one module, we would do a full program. So it took us a year.
That's not bad. That's pretty quick, I'd say, from idea to execution and implementation.
Yeah, to design it and to launch it. So, I think I can say I am, and we are very proud of this very unique, innovative, new longevity leadership program.
So we're doing another one coming up this June from the 17th to the 23rd. That's still
from the 23rd to the 27th of June.
So from the 23rd to the 27th, we absolutely get those dates right, Avivah. Thank you. This is why I need to collaborate, you can see. Tell us a little bit, what are the primary goals of the program? Who's it designed for and why?
So what we have in mind in this program, and again, going back to how it started, and you know better than anybody, there's quite a few midlife rethink programs on the market, which are aiming at helping people think what they're going to do with the second part of their life.
Yeah, and trying to get individuals to work through, like you, the 50 transition, to work through their own career goals, aspirations, and life.
And what you and I had in mind when we created and designed this longevity leadership program is what I would say is a midlife rethink and so much more. So what do I mean by the so much more? The so much more is understanding the trend of longevity, this really big trend that will impact lots of different things. So what is the impact of longevity on countries? So how the demography is changing and it has an impact on how you organize the society. What are the number of schools that you need, how the retirement system is going to work, all those dimensions. So the very macro perspective. Then there's a more intermediary level, what is the impact on cities at the level of cities, how cities we need to be designed in a different way for all those multiple generation living side by side. But then also at the level of companies, there are at least two strong dimensions. One is in terms of markets. So the markets are changing. And if you think about it, in 2050, in the Western world, 25% of the population is going to be over 65. Okay, so let me repeat, 25% of the population is going to be over 65 by 2050. So, that's tomorrow. And very few companies are thinking about this market segment as an interesting segment. Part of what we do is that we open the eyes of our participants to this new market segment. We're bringing lots of examples. I can come back to that in a second. From a company perspective, there's also the question of the talent management. How are we going to manage talent when there's going to be so many more people above 50, above 55, and above 65 as well? Particularly because the regular 18 to 25 or the young people who are normally the talent at entry level in companies, this group of people is going down. And today, there are not enough young people in the Western world. There are not enough young people to substitute the number of people who are retiring. It's a massive change from an HR perspective. And it's very surprising to see that very few companies are ready for that change. And very few companies are even aware that it's going to happen. So in a way, what we're doing in the program is that we are, with lots of data, with lots of different experts, as I said, from very macro to mid-level or to intermediary to a more micro perspective, we are bringing all this information, all this data to the participants. And we are also bringing a lot of interesting examples from companies that have already started to make changes. So our aim is to prepare people at the macro and at the corporate level for this new trend.
It's really to context, to give their own understanding of their personal transition and perspectives for the second half of life, and to use that as kind of a gateway to make them realize this is much bigger than just them, and to put that change into a much wider context that it will also affect their country, their company, and their people.
And the way I see it is that a little bit what happened to me. It started from me. I turned 50. And then I started thinking, okay, from where I sit at a university, our business is prepared for 18 to 25, so young people. But there's going to be less and less of those. There's going to be more and more 50 plus, 55 plus, and 65 plus. And we have very few products for this segment. So how do we need to change? And this is what I did as the Dean for Executive Education by creating this program. And this is what I will be doing in other functions. Yeah. But what I think is very interesting is that the personal dimension impacts the corporate one and vice versa. So what we have in mind in this program is to be very holistic, from macro to super micro, to help people think how the world is changing, how they need to adjust, they need to change in their own personal life and career, and how this trend will probably bring great opportunities.
Absolutely. So let's dig down perhaps into a few of the curriculum highlights. Who do you bring in? Who have we engaged to build this awareness and burgeoning longevity economy opportunities? Can you share a little bit of that, and
Sure.
How have people reacted?
Absolutely. So we normally start with the first macroeconomic session with an economist. He's a colleague here at Catolica. He's called Miguel Gouveia, and he's bringing very macro data at country level and how it impacts the retirement system. He's an expert in this area. So this is normally the first day. Then on the second day, we're bringing an expert on cities His name is Nick Palmerini. He's coming from the UK, and he's bringing amazing examples from cities that have made changes. And that's not because it's not just about longevity is not about addressing better older people. It's about how we make multiple generations live together and work together better. So typically at the level of cities, what cities need to do is to integrate the range of people who already do and who even more in the future will have to live together. And I think the trend has changed from segmenting or having parts of the cities dedicated to each generation to putting generations to live together. We know from lots of examples that the best thing that happens is when the multiple generation interact. We can imagine older people going to primary school to mentor children. We can expect, so there's lots of things that can be done between generations.
Intergenerationally, yeah. And that whole city focus is a huge part of Nick Palmerini's work at the UK National Innovation Centre on Aging that he directs.
Absolutely. Then at the level of companies, we're bringing different perspectives. So we're bringing Lisa Edgar on what is all this huge market opportunity that is the longevity economy. And she's bringing lots of examples of companies in different industries that have successfully addressed the more senior or the older segment. I think the right word is
the new Q3.
The new Q3 or older. I want to use maybe 2 or 3 examples that were discussed. So clearly healthcare is an obvious one. So we know, and it's pretty obvious, that when people age, they tend to consume more healthcare. But the question is, what is the right way to segment the market? Is it by age? Is it by gender? Actually, there's an interesting difference in gender. Women tend to take care of their health in a more continuous way throughout their life, whereas men tend to ignore
as long as they possibly can.
As long as they can. And normally they wake up around the age of 55 and they become very heavy consumers, much more than women. Another example that I would like to discuss in the new edition of the program in 2025 is the industry of fashion. It's an industry I've been doing a lot of research on. And the data shows that in the next 10 years, half of the growth of the fashion industry in the US and the UK, I suspect it's going to be the same in other countries, is going to come from the consumption of the 50 plus segment. And very few brands are deliberately addressing that segment. Most fashion are focusing on the really young consumers, but they tend to consume, they have a lower purchasing power than their mothers. I have teenage daughters, so I know what they consume and I know what I consume. So the companies that can successfully address that segment will be the ones driving growth for the whole industry. And interestingly enough, it seems that it's actually the ones that will find products that can work for multiple generations, again, that will be the most successful. So rather than having a very clear segmentation by age group, it's about segmenting by type of needs. And it will be very much related to the trend of sustainability, because if people tend to buy less products and use them for longer, which is typically what 50 plus people tend to do, that's also more sustainable.
Yeah, it's very interesting that so much of the focus has traditionally been on your future market. So capturing the young and then trying to keep them through the life cycle. When now really the future might be Q3ers, older folk who are going to be the mass consumers of this next few decades.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Going back to the market, we brought Michael Clinton, who's an expert in the media and advertising world, and who's bringing a lot of super interesting examples on how media and advertising were not interested in the 50 plus segment and how, thank God, it is changing in the fashion world, in the cosmetics world with L'Oreal and Estée Lauder changing finally their perspective with an very interesting challenge, which is, if we're talking about longevity, are we talking about anti-aging? Are we talking about aging gracefully? I way prefer the idea of aging gracefully than not aging, because I think there's, we
know who's going to win.
Yeah, exactly. We know that age is going to win. So we're bringing the market perspective from a marketing perspective and from an advertising perspective. Then we're looking at the career part, and we're bringing an expert in this area called Martin Frolander, who has done a lot of work and who keeps on doing a lot of work for companies to help them create more diverse path for people at different generations in companies. What I have seen in the last few months is that companies are much more comfortable with discussing multi-generation than they are with using the word longevity. If multi-generation is what it takes, I think we should go.
Yeah, words matter. So using the vocabulary that works and resonates is very key. So,
yeah. And clearly, one of the trends that we have identified and that we're discussing in the program is that after a certain age, again, I don't know if it's 55 or 65, but after a certain age in Q3, there's a point in time where people want to be involved in more mentoring. And this is a trend that companies and that the corporate world should take more advantage of. We keep on saying that the young people take a longer time to mature. And it might be a good trend if we're going to live longer, good for them that they take a longer time to mature. But then why don't we give them more senior people or more older people to help them doing that transition to those positions? So I think
and reciprocal mentoring across generations.
Reciprocal mentoring.
God knows, I think we have a few things to learn from the young as much as they have from the old.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, one of the things that we do also in this program is that we bring what we call role models. And those role models are people who have done the pivoting between the age of 50 or 60 from the corporate world to nonprofit to teaching. Clearly, teaching is a very popular activity for people who really want to be involved in mentoring.
Entrepreneurship, yep, absolutely.
Entrepreneurship as well. So, we bring a lot of those. And then in terms of content, one of the things that we discuss, and it's mostly with you, Aviva, is discussing this four-quarter model where we help people map their life from the past to the future. And interestingly enough, the participants are of different age. Maybe I should mention that. We had participants from the age of 28 to 62. Some are interested in the topic of longevity from a business perspective, from a market opportunity perspective, and others because it impacts their own career. But in a way, the younger ones, I think, are also very happy that they can better plan their future and those different quarters of their life. And in a way, maybe enjoy more the different steps. Yes. Typically, women who have a lot of pressure because the 30s and the 40s are a big race where women feel that they're, and I am one of them, I was one of them, are racing in their career and building a family and all of that. If the 4 quarters perspective helps them to figure out that they can take a little bit more time because there's going to be a lot of other opportunities later, I think that's a great learning. And in a way, the earlier, the better.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that's one of the key issues for Q2ers who join us on the program is to learn to better pace themselves for these much longer lives and careers. And it's usually a great relief to Q2ers. It's a wonderful wake-up call for Q3ers who realize that there's, it's not done yet. And for Q2ers to, slow down and smell the roses a bit, because it's going to be a much longer ride. And maybe you can also, not just the age range that this program has attracted, but who's the target audience, who benefited, who attended, and who's it aimed at?
So as I said, so it's a very, very balanced group, 50% women, 50% men. So, very balanced. As I said, age from 28 to 62, half international, half local with very international careers. About half still very active in the corporate world and about half already in other type of settings. There's a range of people who have taken the program and who can and will take the program in the future. So it can be people in very much in the corporate world, in marketing or strategy departments that see the longevity as a market opportunity. So for instance, in the insurance industry, in the healthcare industry, but many more. As I said, fashion is an industry that will definitely benefit very much from the longevity trend.
And finance, as we were just talking about before this call.
But we also have people from an HR background who want to see how can they prepare better people in their companies for this trend. So there has been quite a few participants from an HR perspective. And then there are people from a more personal perspective who want to think about what they want to do in their Q3 and later. So it's a really very mixed group. There's a whole dimension of the program. Again, as I said, it's a midlife rethink and so much more. But the midlife rethink part is happening as well. And we made it very holistic in the sense that we made people think about their health. So we had a session with a medical doctor. We made people think about their wealth. So we had a session on personal finance. And clearly, if we're going to live longer, it's interesting to think that most of us have not thought about the positive and negative impact of what will happen if we live longer. Will we have to work longer? Can we use our assets so that we can work less and use our assets in a different way? We also made people think about how, from a health and exercise perspective, we will all need to prepare better for Q3 and Q4. And it's often too late to realize that in your 60s or 70s. So all you can do in your 40s or 50s will make it easier for the next stage. And it was also very holistic in the sense that we had all the food designed and prepared by a nutritionist. We help people think about it. One of the outcomes is that a lot of the participants came back to us and said, I now eat differently since I took the program because I practiced it and because I realized of the impact of it.
Yeah,
so
the food was amazing. It was seriously delicious, fresh and healthy.
And we tried to avoid sugar. And we had a few minutes of meditation every day to also help us. And we exercised throughout the week.
Yeah, and I think that's really what distinguishes this program from so many is just how cross-disciplinary and integrated it is between the personal, the professional, the macro, the micro, the health, the wealth, the logistical and psychological transitions necessary. And there's maybe one other aspect I'd love you to dig into is, of course, the extraordinary city in which all of this is taking place. It takes place in Lisbon, which I think infuses the program with very much some of the messages we're trying to get across.
So it's interesting. Lisbon is becoming a hub of longevity for many different reasons. So first, the south of Europe is becoming a blue zone in the sense that Spain, Italy, France, Portugal are becoming the European countries with the more centenarians and with more people living longer lives. So it's, there's
longer, healthier lives. Yep.
Longer, healthiir lives. This is the first trend. About 10 years ago, a few things were done by the government to help retirees move to Portugal. So that we've had retirees from Northern Europe and different places move to Portugal.
Retirees and digital nomads, no? So both.
And digital nomads of different ages, yeah. Lisbon also has a very nice lifestyle. So again, Southern Europe, a lot of sunny days, beautiful light. So it's true that if you're going to be a digital nomad, whichever age, you might as well be in a sunny, welcoming place. So there's, when you start thinking about it, Lisbon is ticking a lot of boxes to become a longevity hub. Actually, lots of people see similarities between Lisbon and San Francisco, and Lisbon or Portugal can become the California of Europe. There's a
longevity opportunity for
which Lisbon is happening
as well. So it's
and interestingly enough, there's a group of international people in Portugal that have created a group called the Longevity Wednesdays. And they're very dynamic, where we organize an event here at Catolica, where, there's, and mostly international people from a huge range of nationalities that are working on longevity, more from a healthcare perspective. What can we do to live longer? But lots of other areas as well. So really, Lisbon is becoming, and Portugal are becoming a longevity hub.
Okay. So that was season 1. Season 2 is coming back. Give me an idea of what the feedback was from the first group. What do they say, and how has it impacted them, aside from just changing their diets and exercise regimes?
So what we've seen is that on a personal touch, people felt very touched in the sense that they felt it in their skin, that there was a big change happening and that they could have an impact on it. But also often they connected the dots. What I think it was very unique in this group, as I said, you had people from more HR or from a more marketing or strategy perspective, or people who just wanted to rethink their own perspective. But very few people have the full perspective of longevity is going to impact me personally. It's going to impact the corporate world from a market perspective. It's going to impact countries. It's going to impact how we manage talent. So they got a much more broad perspective. And often what happened is that they were able to bring back home and bring back to work, depending on where they're working, a much broader perspective. So what that means is that the HR people had brought more HR examples, but also they realized that it will impact the strategy of their companies often, and vice versa. And the people who want to rethink what they want to do in their Q3 realized, I think, that there are lots of entrepreneurship and corporate opportunities or coaching opportunities, and that therefore in their own path, the trend is probably going to play a very important role. From a personal perspective, thinking about what you're going to do with Q3 is not necessarily an easy exercise, and doing it alone can be difficult. So finding a cohort, a group with whom you can lead that discussion is very powerful. Actually, we kept about half an hour to an hour every single day for people in small group to reflect on what they've learned during the day and what they want to do with it. First, because we know that this is how the knowledge becomes more digested in everyone, but it's also a way for the whole cohort to create and to feel this group perspective and to keep in touch. And it's very interesting to see that a month after and 2 months after the program, we have seen that people are very much
still very connected.
Very connected.
And give us just an idea. I mean, one of my takeaways was just how overwhelmingly enthusiastic was the response. I think you have some numbers on that, right?
Absolutely.
They graded this program.
So, in every program, we ask people to evaluate the program.
Sure.
So, we have to evaluate the program from 1 to 7. And this program has a unique evaluation of 6.75. So, out of 7, which is a very, very unique. So people were very, very enthusiastic also because the dynamic between the members was so high.
And between the faculty. I think the faculty and the participants melded incredibly well. So
I think we created a community, really.
Yeah, we really did create a community of change agents who saw the light of just how big a transformation we're embarking on, which is maybe a good segue into what's your thinking around a longer term vision. Where might this go? I mean, it certainly looks like it's embedded at the business school. Where else might it go?
So the way I see it is that, as you know, we're preparing the 2025 edition. It's still going to be a 1-week program because I think it's difficult for people to commit to more than a week in person. But the way we're going to extend it in time is that we will start with a few online sessions before and a few after. So I expect that we will expand it from a week to something like a month, still 1 week in person. And it's very important for people to start preparing themselves before and to have time to reflect again with this community afterwards. My expectation and what I would love to see, if you ask me what I would love to see in 5 years or 10 years, is for this program to be broader and longer in many different dimensions. What I see as an education expert is I hope that we can create a new standard. 50 years ago, when MBAs were started, there was no standard called the MBA. Along the years, Harvard created the first MBA and so on and so forth. And then the MBA became a product in itself. Advanced Management Program, AMP, are now becoming a standard in business schools. So I'm hoping that longevity leadership, there can be different names. So there's already the midlife rethinks, and they're becoming a little bit of a standard. There's about a dozen of those worldwide. But I'm hoping that midlife rethinks or midlife plus longevity programs can become a new standard. And I would love that these programs go across business schools and other faculties. And as you know, Aviva, I just took a new role as the Pro-Rector for Innovation and Entrepreneurship at the whole of Catolica University, so at the university level. And the university has actually not 1 but 2 business schools, not 1 but 2 law schools, 1 medical school, human science school, and lots of different faculties. And I'm hoping that this topic of longevity, which I think belongs to the university level, much higher than the business school, can become a topic for universities as a whole university topic. Actually, it's interesting. Harvard started it in the business school and Stanford started it more on the medical part. So what that shows is that this is a topic that is across at least medical and business. But I believe as a Catholic university, we even have a theology department. I think this is a topic that should belong to the university level. And I'm hoping that this is what I can do in the next few years and become a standard. The MBA of the 55 plus.
Amen. Okay. We're going to conclude with, if we've convinced people of the interest of this program, where do they go and how do they enroll?
So you go on the website of Catolica, but simpler than that.
Put the link in the show notes?
On the show notes, of course. But if you go on Google and you write Longevity Leadership Catolica, I just checked, it works. You find the program and you can enroll online. Of course, if you have any question, you will have my contact details. Very happy to take questions. The program is going to take place in Lisbon, the beautiful city of Lisbon, normally very nice and sunny in June, 23rd to 27th, Monday to Friday. As I said, we'll have a few sessions online before and after. What else should I say about the program?
I think that's it. I think that's a wrap. And I'd like to just thank you, Céline, personally for taking on this topic. Your own leadership journey has been incredibly inspiring to watch as you did exactly what so many of our participants did. You started on your own personal journey and then brought it home to your organization and realized that this is a huge story in the making. And I think you've marked and the business school, and now the university, and perhaps other universities will soon be inspired by the model you've offered. So thanks for your far-sighted, innovative, open mindset.
Thank you, Aviva. This would not have been possible without you. So I think, you and I met, it was probably written in the stars, and this is how we're going to change the world, one longevity program at a time.
Amen. Thank you so much for joining today. Thanks for participating and creating this program, and look forward to anybody who's interested. Call us, either Céline or me, for more information. Céline, have a wonderful start to 25 and see you in June in Lisbon. For more thinking about the impact of our 4-quarter lives, you can read my column at Forbes and subscribe to my Elderberries newsletter on Substack. Let's design lives that aren't just longer, but better.